The exact moment Patricia Vance decided that my family's legacy was just another accessory for her pampered son was the moment she signed the death warrant for her own perfect little suburban kingdom. It was 6 a.m., the sky barely bruising purple over the mountains, when the silence of Ghost River Ranch was shattered, not by the call of a hawk or the lowing of cattle, but by the violent crunch of gravel under tires. 3 county cruisers screaming up my driveway like they were raiding a cartel compound. The smell of diesel exhaust choking out the scent of my morning coffee. And there she was, the queen bee of the Sapphire Creek enclave, standing by her pristine, white G-Wagon that had never seen a speck of mud in its life, holding her phone up, filming me with a predatory grin, practically salivating as the deputies swarmed my porch, hand on their holsters, all because she claimed I was trespassing on the very land my great-grandfather, Jedediah Sterling, staked out with his own blood and sweat back in 1889. She had called the cops on me for walking the perimeter of Dead Man's Basin, a 12-acre spring-fed lake that rests in the heart of my property, the same water where we scattered my grandmother's ashes, the same water her son, Braden, a 20-something lifestyle influencer with a broccoli haircut and 0 calluses, had been illegally selling tickets to, charging strangers $200 a pop to fish in my private waters. Then, Patricia whipped out a manila folder, waving it like a holy scripture, claiming she had documents proving I was blocking historical community access. But Patricia made one fatal, catastrophic calculation that morning. She didn't know that the rancher she was trying to bully didn't just own the land. I controlled the entire budget that kept the lights on in her soulless subdivision. My name is Liam Sterling, and this is the story of how a bored, power-hungry HOA president tried to evict a 4th-generation rancher from his own history and ended up learning the hard way why you never, ever start a war with a man who knows where the literal and metaphorical bodies are buried. To understand the sheer insanity of this, you have to understand the land, 2,400 acres of Wyoming wilderness, a place where the wind cuts through you like a knife and the history is written in the scars on the trees, a place I've run alone since my divorce, and since my daughter, Maya, left for university, a place I intend to die on. 5 years ago, the silence was broken when a developer bought the neighboring section, promising rural harmony, while bulldozing the forest to cram 200 identical McMansions onto postage stamp lots, calling it Sapphire Creek Enclave. And like a fool, I signed an emergency access easement just to be neighborly, opening the door for Patricia Vance to slither into my life. She was a piece of work, late 40s, wearing yoga pants that cost more than my tractor payments, the wife of some investment banker who looked at a cow and saw only a steak dinner, and her complaints started the second the ink was dry, claiming my cattle smelled too much like animals, that my native wildflowers looked unruly from her breakfast nook, asking if I could pave my dirt roads to keep the dust off her windows. I laughed her off, which was my first mistake, because a narcissist denied is a narcissist activated. Then came Braden, her son, an entrepreneur whose entire business model seemed to be taking selfies and annoying working people, who discovered my lake and decided it was his personal studio, driving his lifted truck through my fences, leaving mountains of beer cans and protein bar wrappers in the cattails, blasting EDM that drowned out the meadowlarks, treating a sanctuary like a frat house. Tolerance turned to annoyance, annoyance turned to rage, especially when I found out he was running a business, literally advertising exclusive wilderness experiences on his socials, posting photos of my grandfather's cabin like he'd built it himself, claiming it was his ancestral retreat. That's when Patricia played her hand, showing up at my door one evening with that fake, condescending smile that makes your skin crawl, slapping photocopied maps onto my kitchen table, pointing at official-looking stamps with a manicured fingernail, telling me her historical research proved that the original homestead deed included recreational rights for the township residents. "We just want to respect the traditions of the community, Liam," she said, her voice dripping with fake empathy. "Surely you don't want to be the grumpy hermit hoarding nature. I've read every deed, lien, and survey on this property since I was 12, and I knew for a fact that Sapphire Creek didn't exist until 2019, while Jedediah's claim was filed when this state was barely a territory. But I remembered my dad's advice. When a coyote shows its teeth, you don't run, you wait for it to lunge. So I played dumb. told her I'd need to show these to my lawyer. Photographing every page she had while she smirked, thinking she'd already won, thinking that kindness was weakness, thinking that because I wore muck boots instead of Ferragamos, I was stupid. She had no idea that she was sitting in a kitchen built by men who survived blizzards and bear attacks, trying to steal it with a forged PDF. But she didn't stop at paper. She weaponized the bureaucracy, calling the county inspector, a decent guy named Officer Ramirez, 3 times a week, forcing him to come out and inspect illegal water diversion. That didn't exist. We walked the property line, Ramirez shaking his head, kicking the dirt, saying, "I know it's garbage, Liam, but she's creating a paper trail. She's building a case for harassment, making it look like there's an ongoing dispute so she can sue for access." The real gut punch came when she organized a community safety meeting at the HOA clubhouse, a place I'd never set foot in, where she stood in front of a projector displaying a blown-up photo of my face next to a grazing steer, telling 15 terrified suburbanites that my cattle were contaminating the groundwater, that I was mentally unstable, a feudal lord terrorizing innocent families. The rumors started swirling. Whispers in the grocery store that I was broke, that the ranch was in foreclosure, that I was selling out to a strip mall developer, character assassination designed to isolate me, to make me sell, to break me. So I hired a surveyor, spent $800 to prove that her pristine fence line was actually encroaching 3 feet onto my property for 200 yards, and then I installed the eyes, 8 high-definition security cameras with night vision and cloud backup, hidden in the trees around the lake. The sound of me digging those post holes felt like the drums of war, because I knew about adverse possession. I knew if I let them treat my land like theirs for 5 years, it became theirs, and I wasn't about to let Braden and his influencer army steal my birthright for a TikTok trend. The cameras paid off immediately, catching Braden bringing a full film crew, boom mics and all, shooting a commercial for some caffeine powder brand, telling the director, "Yeah, this is the family spot, been in the Vance bloodline forever." A complete lie considering he was born in San Diego. But the footage revealed something darker, something that made my blood run cold, because he wasn't just lying for clout. He was running an industrial-scale operation, bringing in dozens of paying clients a week, trampling the nesting grounds of the herons, stress-testing my cattle until my prize bull stopped eating. Then came the twist, the little knife in the ribs that changed the game. Braden posted a video of himself building a rustic dock on the far side of the lake, my lake, hammering nails into my trees, bragging about this sweat equity. And the video got 30,000 likes, but I had the raw footage of him hiring 2 day laborers to build it while he sat in a folding chair vaping. Commercial trespassing, property damage, fraud, all wrapped in a nice digital bow. And as I sat on my porch that night, watching the sun dip below the peaks, sipping whiskey that burned going down, I realized Patricia and her son had made a critical error. They assumed rural meant simple. They assumed I would roll over. But they were about to learn that in Wyoming, we don't just know the land, we know the law. And I was about to turn their paper trail into a noose. Patricia didn't wait for the dust to settle before launching her next missile, escalating from bureaucratic annoyance to full-blown psychological warfare. It started with a knock on my door from 3 neighbors, good people I'd known for years, the Hendersons and the Patels, looking at their shoes like ashamed school children, holding a petition. "Liam, we're sorry," Bob Henderson mumbled, unable to meet my eyes. "But the HOA says your cattle operation violates the sensory harmony clause of the subdivision covenants. They're fining us collectively if we don't file a nuisance complaint." Sensory harmony. I repeated, the words tasting like ash, realizing Patricia had convinced them that my ranch, which had been here since before the invention of the automobile, was the reason their property values were stagnating, not the fact that their houses were made of cardboard and malice. But the real escalation, the move that showed me just how dirty she was willing to play, came 3 days later when my phone buzzed with a notification from the sheriff's department, a domestic disturbance call, at my address. Sheriff Thorne, a man I'd fished with, showed up looking tense, hand resting near his belt, body cam blinking red. "Patricia Vance claims you threatened her," he said, voice flat. "Claims you cornered her near the easement, made aggressive gestures, told her she'd pay in blood if she didn't back off." I almost laughed, but I remembered my lawyer, Elena Cross, telling me to never show emotion to a cop when you're being framed. So I pulled out my phone and opened the Cloud app. Yesterday at 4 p.m., I asked and played the video. Patricia screaming at me from 20 feet away while I stood there, arms crossed, calm as a statue, telling her to please leave my property, never raising my voice, never moving a muscle. Sheriff Thorne watched it, jaw tightening, realizing he was being used as a pawn in a rich woman's game. But he warned me she was filing for a restraining order anyway, a tactical nuke designed to create a legal record of me being dangerous. She was trying to paint me as the unhinged rural psycho, the villain in her Lifetime movie, and it was working. My liability insurance carrier called the next day, threatening to drop me because the HOA had reported my lake as an attractive nuisance, a legal term meaning I was liable if one of Braden's trespassers drowned while illegally swimming. They were boxing me in, financial ruin on one side, legal cages on the other, but then they got greedy, they got sloppy. My daughter Maya, a journalism major with a nose for rot, drove down from college and started digging into Patricia's background, uncovering that she'd been fired from a real estate firm in Denver for forging signatures, and her husband's bank was under federal audit for predatory lending. But the physical war began on a Saturday, the hottest day of the year, when my water pump system, an 80-year-old beast that fed the troughs for 300 head of cattle, catastrophically failed. I found the wires cut, clean snips, hidden behind the panel, and tire tracks in the mud that matched Braden's ridiculous custom treads perfectly. My cattle were thirsty, suffering, and as I scrambled to haul water by hand, spending $8,000 on emergency repairs, I realized this wasn't a dispute anymore. It was an attempt to kill my livelihood. The community turned on me, fueled by a local news segment Patricia orchestrated, featuring crying children holding signs that said, "Share the water," and "Stop bullying our kids," painting me as a monster hoarding resources, and a GoFundMe for their legal defense, raised 12 grand in a day. The comments section filled with death threats from strangers promising to come liberate my land. Then, the Free the Basin party happened. Braden invited 200 people for a protest that was really just a rave. Cars lining the county road for miles, fireworks launching over the dry grass, terrified cattle scattering into the dark. They started a grass fire that burned 40 acres before the volunteer fire department, which I helped fund, could put it out. And that was the key. Funding. The morning after the fire, smelling of smoke and exhaustion, I was going through my grandfather's old filing cabinets, looking for insurance policies, when I found it. Buried under decades of grain receipts, a thick, yellowed folder labeled Cedar Ridge Service District, 1962. I opened it, dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight, and as I read the legalese, my hands started to shake, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of pure, unadulterated power. The document detailed the formation of a special rural service district to provide emergency services and road maintenance to the scattered properties of the valley, and because Ghost River Ranch was the anchor parcel, the largest landholding, the owner of the ranch was automatically designated the district administrator. I read it 3 times. The powers were absolute. As administrator, I had the sole authority to approve, deny, or terminate all municipal service contracts for the district. Police patrols, fire response, road grading, snow removal, even the contract for the water pressure maintenance that served the subdivision. I called Elena, and then I called my old friend Dan Miller, a forensic accountant who hates fraud more than he hates taxes. They confirmed it. The law was still active, never repealed. But here was the kicker, the detail that made Dan laugh like a maniac. The service district was funded by property tax assessments based on acreage, meaning I was paying 60% of the budget, while the entire HOA subdivision paid only 40%. For 5 years, I had been paying for the police cars that Patricia called to harass me. I was paying for the fire trucks that put out Braden's fires. I was subsidizing my own persecution. And when Dan looked at the books, he found the smoking gun. The HOA had been illegally billing the service district for private amenities, pool cleaning, clubhouse landscaping, security patrols provided by a company owned by Patricia's brother-in-law. They were looting public funds, my funds, to maintain their country club lifestyle, embezzling nearly $2 million over 5 years. I sat in my kitchen, the silence of the ranch returning, and I realized I wasn't just a victim, I was the boss. I didn't need to sue them. I didn't need to fight them in the street. I just needed to sign a piece of paper. The service district administrator had been asleep for a long time, but he was wide awake now, and it was time to turn off the lights. The counteroffensive began with the silence of a falling axe. We didn't scream, we didn't post on social media, we simply sent certified letters. Elena drafted them, surgical and cold, notifying the Sapphire Creek HOA board that, effective immediately, the Rural Service District Administrator, me, was exercising his authority to audit all financial records and was suspending all non-essential service contracts pending an investigation into embezzlement. The panic was instantaneous. I cut the security patrol contract first, the one funneling money to Patricia's family. Then I suspended the road maintenance funds that were actually paying for their decorative flower beds. The letters hit on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the subdivision was in chaos because I also forwarded the files to the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division and the State Attorney General. Patricia tried to spin it, sending out hysterical emails claiming I was a rural terrorist, holding the community hostage, but the narrative shattered when the residents got their new tax assessments. Without my ranch subsidizing their lifestyle, their HOA dues were set to triple overnight to cover the actual cost of their services. The emergency assessment was $3,200 per household, due immediately. The illusion of their affordable paradise evaporated. Patricia's desperation was palpable, like the smell of ozone before a storm. She actually came to me, stumbling across the pasture in her heels, finding me fixing the fence her son's friends had cut. She wasn't holding a phone this time. She was shaking. "Liam, we can fix this," she stammered, offering me $50,000 cash, stolen money, no doubt, to drop the audit and let Braden keep personal access to the lake. I just tapped the body camera on my chest, capturing the bribery attempt in 4K resolution. "You just offered a public official a bribe using embezzled funds," I said softly. "Get off my land." The end came at the county commissioner's hearing on Thursday, a public forum that Patricia had demanded, thinking she could shame me into submission. It was packed, standing room only, news crews lining the walls, the air thick with sweat and tension. Patricia sat with her high-priced legal team, looking smug, until I stood up. I didn't give a speech. I gave a masterclass in destruction. I laid out the 1962 charter. I displayed the graphs showing I paid for their safety. I played the audio of Braden bragging about his illegal profits. I showed the video of the fence cutting. And then, the coup de grace, I played the recording of Patricia offering me the bribe. The room went silent, that heavy, suffocating silence of a truth so undeniable it sucks the air out of your lungs. Then, the neighbors stood up, Margaret Henderson, weeping, testifying that Patricia had threatened to foreclose on her home if she didn't sign the false complaints against me. The facade crumbled. The commissioners voted unanimously to support my authority and terminate the fraudulent contracts. Sheriff Thorne stepped forward, not to arrest me, but to put handcuffs on Patricia Vance. The headline the next day read, "HOA Queen Arrested in $1 Million Fraud." Patricia got 18 months in federal prison and a bill for $400,000 in restitution. Braden got probation, community service, and a court order banning him from social media monetization for 5 years, a fate worse than death for an influencer. His truck was seized as an instrument of a crime. 6 months later, the silence at Ghost River Ranch is real. The ecosystem is healing. The water is clear. The new HOA board is made of decent people who signed a formal treaty with me, recognizing my rights. We established a scholarship fund with the recovered money for kids studying agricultural law. I stood on the porch this morning, coffee in hand, watching the mist roll off Dead Man's Basin. My great-grandfather fought the elements to keep this land. I fought the entitlement of a generation that thinks the world exists to be a backdrop for their vanity. We both won, but it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? In a world where ownership is becoming a blurry line between legal deeds and public perception, where a mob with smartphones can try to rewrite history, how safe is your legacy really? Is justice something the law gives you? Or is it something you have to take, waiting in the dark with a stack of old papers and the will to burn the corrupt to the ground? Tell me what you think in the comments. Was I too harsh, or did they get exactly what they ordered? And if you ever find an old file in a dusty cabinet, read it. You might just be the king of your own castle and not even know it.